Today on the Snack Covenant.
There's this very peculiar statement here. Heir to the ritual blood, purveyor of ministration, place your hand on the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh. Now, this is something that doesn't really translate well, so I don't blame the localization here.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and snack.
Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Snack Covenant, episode 318. Now I'd like everybody to close their eyes, and I'd like you to visualize a guest. And for as long as we've known him, he's never taken one breath. Introduce yourself.
Introducing Godwin.
Hello, this is Death Prince. Happy to be here.
Now, Lokey, for anybody who's new to the podcast, may you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Lokey. I'm a big fan of these FromSoft tier games. Kind of weird, I understand, on this channel especially. But I like to analyze these games from the angle of the translation, specifically how the localization has changed up the original Japanese script and how that it therefore affects our understanding of the lore. You can find my work at LokeySouls.com, where I analyze these games a lot for free. I'm also recently published as the author of ScHlAuChi, which breaks down one of these specific games, Dark Souls 1, in its full detail, the complete game, in a very comprehensive fashion, so check that out.
Yeah, and you actually answer a lot of cool questions in that book, such as, who is Velka? What is Velka? Why is Velka?
Late at night, I think of you, your vision floods my mind.
On the subject of the localization process from Japanese to English, I can say pretty solid that as I've gone through these games from Demon Souls to Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Bloodborne, that yes, these games are most definitely written in Japanese first and then localized second. A lot of the differences between the Japanese and the English script are in a case of usually that the localization doesn't quite understand what's being said in the original language, or maybe you can come up with a few reasons. Are they lazy? Is they rushed? Blah, blah. Like you come up with all the torps of like specific reasons why, but the underlying premise is that half the time you're looking at the localization making an assumption on something, they're probably getting it wrong, and usually it's irreconcilably wrong. You can't just say, oh, you have to look at the both languages and then kind of put it together and somehow you get the perfect mix or whatever. It's like, no, it really is much like, most foreign properties that get localized into another language. It's just the original language is the most valid, or the only really one that can be truly valid. And that therefore, when we're looking through analyzing it, you analyze Bloodborne from the Japanese side, you get a very coherent, consistent script for the most part all the way through, right? There's always like the exceptions, like there's a typo there or something, or like, like a legit mistake or what have you. But like generally speaking, that's the trend. Whereas when you're going with the English scripts on these games, especially the earlier games, when you look at the English script, you end up getting a lot of like contradictions and weird like oddball and oddities and inconsistencies maybe in languages and things like that. It could just make it harder to follow, if not just make it impossible to actually get to the quote-unquote right conclusion, or at least the conclusion that's the game seems to be wanting to point you towards. So
That's an excellent point, Lokey. Thank you.
Welcome everyone. Glad you made it thus far. Today we look at the translations behind some of the most interesting notes of Bloodborne.
And the first note you have here is at Yusefka's clinic.
Right, it's the very first one you get as soon as you wake up from your nightmare, your harrowing nightmare, and then you just kind of find it there on the chair, and it just, the English reads something like, the handwritten scroll, seek Paleblood, transcend the hunt, right? And that sort of sets you up on your journey, right? Because as soon as you begin the game, the Blood Minister is sort of responding to you, asking about Paleblood. Oh, Paleblood, yeah, sure, yeah, Paleblood's here. Yeah, we got you, Paleblood. Just get in this little chair, sign this contract away with all your personal information and stuff, probably on your blood. Let me just, pump you up with a little bit of this wonderful, magical Yarnum blood. I promise you, it'll all be great. If anything bad happens, don't worry, it's all a bad dream, I promise you. Nothing bad's gonna happen here, right?
As a research assistant, that's exactly how I present the consent form to my patients. And in Japanese, it's a little more direct and lore-filled.
Yes, because one thing that the term handwritten scroll doesn't get across is the fact that it's basically written in your own handwriting. And that's sort of what the Japanese text is directly implying, is that, okay, this isn't just anyone's scroll, this is something that you yourself wrote. It's something where, like, you look at the scroll and it basically says that, like, it's written by yourself, right? Like, you can kind of tell, oh yeah, this is like, and that would be how I would interpret it as well. It's like, either you recognize your own handwriting, or at the very least the game's kind of telling you that's definitely your own handwriting. But either way, it's like there seems to be that understanding of, okay, this is what I should be going after, this is what I'm here for.
Thank you. The second note is in the hunter's dream.
Yeah, so in the hunter's dream, we have this idea of to escape this dreadful hunter's dream. This has caused some confusion because some people note how it says the if you're captured in the abominable hunter's nightmare in the Japanese. So people wonder, oh, does that somehow relate to the DLC or anything? I'm skeptical. It seems like, especially besides the fact this came before the DLC, this note, the idea is that a dream and a nightmare, which in Japanese is literally just bad dream, just means the idea that what is your perspective on this dream world, right? Do you consider it generally positive or do you consider it generally negative? If you consider it positive, you're going to consider it the hunter's dream. But for those who have maybe been trapped here for a while and don't want to be hunting anymore, they might be like, this is a hunter's nightmare. That's sort of my position on this. And obviously it just gives you otherwise like generic stuff about, hey, if you want to get to the dawn ending or whatever, like you better keep on going fighting through these beasts, right? So that's sort of like the plot foreshadowing. And then there's another note about the blood drunk hunter. Nothing too crazy to say about that. The term used, they describe how there's a deformed creature, which of course refers to the amygdala. But yeah, and there's this idea that, the Japanese use a term that means like grotesque, so something that's like, it means like a different, the kanji reads as like different shape, different form, right? So it's just something that kind of looks different from the norm or anything standard, right? Which, pretty accurate to amygdala. And you can kind of, depending on how that kanji is supposed to be read, it can kind of have the connotation of like atypical or grotesque, right? It can go either way.
I just like the idea that you're walking around Yarnum thinking, what here looks weird? There's something here that's supposed to be a little weird, but I can't quite. It's just everything.
It's a grotesque creature. Which one?
Now, there is a note in Central Yarnum.
Yeah, so like as we finally get out of Yosefka's clinic and out of the hunter's dream and all that, we finally get to enter into the main streets of Yarnum. We find a note on a medicine cabinet or something right in front of.
I always interpreted it as a liquor stand with like blood drunk stuff in it, and the guy is there with the pistol to like stop you robbing his liquor cabinet.
To the actual note that we're talking about here, and this is why I want to give sort of the idea of the clinic background, because it helps contextualize this note with the wheelchair man, much like the blood minister we saw in Yosefka's clinic, is we talk about this idea of, when the hunt began, the healing church left us, blocking the great bridge to Cathedral Ward, as old Yarnum burned to the ground that moonlit night. The Japanese is a bit more clear on like the language of what this man's trying to get across, which is like on the hunt night, basically, the great bridge of the church town was closed. So he's talking about like this hunt night in this context here. The healing church is sort of closed shop and they're not letting anybody in, right? The healing church is planning to abandon us, right? So this whoever wrote this note, maybe the wheelchair man, is basically saying, oh, the church has closed up things. Oh, they're going to abandon us just as they burned the old city on the night of that moon. Which is relevant for two reasons. One is the idea is that they are comparing this to the old Yarnum incident. So it's the idea there's this paranoia here, clearly. So they're like, oh, this has happened before, where the church basically kind of like quarantined itself from everything. This happened with old Yarnum, and now we're next. And then also the idea of that moon, it's not just that moonlit night, it's the idea that they're talking about a specific kind of moon, which obviously gets expanded upon in later notes and stuff, that the red moon. The idea that the old Yarnum incident wasn't just purely, obviously, just the beast. There was also this moon that kind of came in and threw a curveball at everybody. So
Darn moon.
Darn moon. You could say that for a lot of this game.
We have a couple of notes in Cathedral Ward.
The password gatekeeper is the watchman of Bergenworth. Only the cathedral's adage opens that gate. The idea is that, okay, so Forbidden Woods seems to become the Forbidden Woods after the old Yarnum incident, because Mensis with the Bergenworth lecture building and the Red Moon and obviously the Nightmare of Mensis and all that seems to have come together around the old Yarnum incident. So that's why the Red Moon appeared during that, and therefore the choir / the healing church are basically like, okay, we're gonna block all access to Bergenworth at this point because we're gonna go to where the lake is, where no lecture building is now. Have Rom create a special magical lake that's gonna like keep the Mensis rituals at bay and all that, and then to keep anyone from going there, we're just gonna like block off access. So that seems to be the general idea with the choir's reasoning and Rom and all that.
So my take on the Watchman was always different, which is like, because he's a Watchman of Bergenworth, he's not a Watchman of the Healing Church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my take on it was always like, Lawrence refuses to like fear the old blood, so he leaves. So Willem puts this guy there and makes it so the only way Lawrence can ever get back is if he says, fear the old blood.
So he admits his supervisor was right.
There's this very peculiar statement here about how, heir to the ritual blood, purveyor of ministration, place your hand on the altar's sacred covering and inscribe Master Lawrence's adage upon your flesh. Now, this is something that doesn't really translate well, so I don't blame the localization here. So the point here is that, okay, one who inherits the secret ceremonies of blood. So again, this is going back to the idea of the vicar. Who's going to be the vicar? Who's going to be Lawrence's successor? The one who knows these secret ceremonies and all that. Like, you're supposed to inherit all this stuff that goes back to the church and all that. Okay, so in order for you to be master of the blood donations, or again, this goes back to the idea that, the blood transfusions and all that are happening in Yharnam, they're just, the church is just a charity organization. They're donating blood, right? They're collecting donated blood from blood saints and stuff like that, and they're giving it all back and yada yada, right? They're distributing it for the masses. Touch the holy cap on the altar and engrave Master Lawrence's adage into yourself. So this seems to be the idea of the vicars seem to go through this kind of ritual whenever like a new vicar is being decided. And again, for those that don't know, vicar, we're talking about like the leader of the church, essentially, at least ostensibly. Right here, this idea of a holy cap, this is a term that it's the same as Lawrence's skull, in that skull literally means a head cap. So they just take out the basically like the head bone portion and just replace it with the holy kanji, and basically say, oh, it's the holy cap, right? So they kind of are just like prettying up how it's like, yeah, just place your hand on the skull and you'll get like memories and it'll tell you the adage, and then you can finally formally become the new leader of the church. There you go, happy. And the only other thing for Cathedral Ward I can talk about is, again, there's the Odin Chapel thing where it's like, oh, the Spider of Bergenworth has hidden all the ceremonies. In the English, it says like hides all manner of rituals, same thing, nothing really crazy there. Even our master who cannot be seen. So the English just says a lost master. So this idea of, oh, it keeps our lost master from us. Again, the idea is that Odin is like, Odin doesn't have a defined form. He's basically almost become one with blood. He's someone who can't really be seen in the same way that we can see other great ones, even in dreams and stuff, right? Because they take on like a distinct physical form of some type. It's like this eldritch abomination, but it's something recognizable, right? Versus say Odin, where he's like, I'm just blood. And then obviously there's the whole point about how their head, it seems to basically drive them insane. There's like references to how like everyone in Odin Chapel goes mad. It seems to be the idea that when Rom basically tries to protect everyone from the influence of the great ones so that Mensis and people can't keep on trying to make contact with them, this also basically blocks off contact for the people at Odin Chapel, and they kind of go insane from not being able to hear their god speak to them anymore.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems like for whatever reason, Odin Chapel becomes the place where Odin decides he wants to operate with, building up like a little personal cult and stuff. The actual church seems to date back to really early in the church's history, directly connected to Healing Church, very closely connected, obviously, to the lower church into Old Yharnam. Just its central location, like all roads lead back to Odin Chapel, right? So it's like, okay. So it seems to be the idea that when the Cathedral Ward was first being built up, like the church starts in like Old Yharnam, but then they're building up the Cathedral Ward. So it's like, okay, we have the Healing Church workshop next to Gurman's old workshop, but we'll also build this church. And this seems to have been what the Odin Church was. That's why there's a big graveyard there, because that's where they were first burying the bodies instead of in the Forbidden Woods or what have you, when the church is taking over and all this. And then eventually, basically, it becomes like almost this like forgotten like side piece, because now there's the Grand Cathedral and all that stuff. And for whatever reason, Odin seems to have, like, either before or after this church basically gets abandoned from being like the main church, seems like Odin's still around, like trying to somehow get a baby, and has all these followers and stuff to help.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lokey.
No problem.
So the next couple of notes are in Old Yharnam.
Yeah, so, like, obviously, the first one, you go to the door, there's this big note on the door. Obviously, it's been opened before, because we can see the slit between it, so apparently no one listens to this note, so...
Yeah.
But the idea is like, okay, this town is long abandoned. Hunters not wanted here. Basically, same here. It says like abandoned town from here. Beast hunters unneeded. Turn back. So it's like, hey, we don't need the beast hunting here. It doesn't have to be done, right? So the connotation's slightly different.
It's like a reverse wanted ad.
It's like, we don't need any beast hunters. Go away. Stop asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Jura's idea is that's obviously like a note left by Jura saying, hey, you don't have to hunt this place. Go hunt up above or whatever if you want. I'm protecting the people here, and I won't let you hunt them, right? Like, that seems to be the idea.
I have a very important question.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jura put the note there and then found a way around?
The other note for this area is, of course, has to, again, go back to the Red Moon. Again, it's trying to build on this narrative thread on the Old Yarnum incident, where it's this idea of, okay, the Red Moon hangs low and beasts rule the streets. Are we left with no other choice than to burn it all to cinders? Again, so Red Moon nears. This town is nothing but beasts. So this idea of that, okay, they were already maybe struggling to deal with like all the beasts that were caused by like you had the ashen blood disease, and then you have this epidemic of beasts that happens right after it as a result, and then they're trying to put it down and deal with it in Old Yarnum, and then they're like, okay, well maybe we can be able to get this under control. Then the Red Moon shows up. It's like, okay, now everyone's a beast. What do we know? Okay, there's the idea of, there's no end to them, so it's like, okay, there's just too many. Is it all already too late and we have no choice but to burn everything? Now this is another hunter's message that we find in what I talked about as that clinic building before, right? So we can't go into the building from the bottom. Like I said, there's just the entranceway with like statues next to the doors and stuff like that, but you can only enter through like the middle/top areas, right? And I think that's where Jura first starts shooting at you, is atop that building. And
yeah.
And then the inside of the building is, of course, like we say, you explore, you see the same stuff. You see like medicine cabinets, you see like the same like little it's like seating arrangements and those stands with coffins and things like that, right? And some of the boxes and things or whatever. So you go through there and you climb up and you find this message along with some hunter corpses that clearly go back to the Old Yarnum stuff. They have some of the same items and things that Jura and crew have. So there's clearly this idea that there's these different hunters and the like who are all, for one reason or another, headquartering here to deal with at this clinic in order to help kind of operate out their hunt for the Old Yarnum, right? Because this makes sense too. Because if you're gonna want to like have an HQ base and you're not gonna choose like the church next door, like they built platforms and stuff to reach it. We see with the wooden and all that, but like it's not like a formal like, okay, we can just walk right over. If you're gonna like do all this stuff in order to kind of deal with the beast, probably makes sense to do at the clinic because that's where all the patients are going. You can deal with the beast right away if they transform there at the clinic instead of like having to be like, oh no, there's more beasts at the clinic again. Well, better save all those patients.
Yeah.
So just overall, we kind of get this sense that, okay, so they're using this old clinic. They kind of use as their HQ, but Jura ends up kind of betraying them and kind of clears it all out, forces everyone out of Old Yarnum, takes over, and it's like, okay, I got this Gatling gun. No one come near.
Now, the next note. It's found in the Healing Church workshop.
Why does this one get the special intro?
Because the way I envision it is they're all hanging out in the Dan Brown Memorial ScHlAuChi.
Oh, for God's sake.
And they're like, oh my god, you guys, the sky and the cosmos are one.
I mean... Hi, Sophie here. In a rare moment of self-awareness, Sin has realised that something she mentioned in this episode likely won't make sense to most of the people listening. So she's asked me to step in and explain what the Dan Brown Memorial ScHlAuChi is. I have no idea what the Dan Brown Memorial ScHlAuChi is, because after we record these, I immediately purge them from my memory and tell myself that, well, maybe the next one will be good. If you'd like to learn about the Dan Brown Memorial ScHlAuChi, along with other things even Sin thinks are too stupid to release on the channel, you can find them at patreon.com/ScHlAuChi. Now, back to the podcast.
I like how it's signed by the choir too. Like they wanted to make sure you knew it was them.
That was very deep. We gotta say.
Like it's like, oh, dude, the cosmos in the sky. Okay, write that down. Okay, The cosmos is in the sky. By the choir. This isn't too deep in the meaning. The idea is that, of course, the localization kind of gets the same idea across. Sky, cosmos, they're the same thing, right?
Yeah.
The idea is that, okay, the cosmos, it's up there in the sky. And the choir basically had that realization. What's interesting is with the DLC, we understand that this actually wasn't the first time with the astral clock towers and the research hall and all the stuff happening there. And obviously, even looking at like Bergenworth and Willem's experiments and things like that, it's very clear that the Healing Church already knew this that the idea is like, okay, Cosmos up there, we want to contact up with the sky. You know, when we try to get in contact with them, they throw meteors back at us, which means it's working. So clearly we need to keep going. So it's clear that the idea is that the choir were kind of kept out of the loop. But like, because they're just being used to go down, do some like dungeon diving and is for us, right? Like, we're old men, we can't be like doing all this risky stuff, so we'll let the youngins we've been raising and like brainwashing into being our research assistants are gonna do it. And then they kind of realized, hey, wait a second. Wait a minute. You're not giving us the respect we deserve, are you? I don't know what you're talking about. You didn't tell us about the cosmos in the sky. I don't know what you're talking about. No. So you can kind of see, well, maybe if the teacher isn't going to be teaching all their secrets, maybe the students need to, take over and, just kind of shove you into an incinerator.
Oh.
I mean, those smokestacks gotta be coming from somewhere.
Yeah. The next note is in the Nightmare Frontier.
Okay, so the Nightmare Frontier. This is the Patches dial note that he leaves. So it's like, this way to witness a miracle, and then he does his typical Patches kicks you down the hole.
Yeah.
In this case, it's the term of see a mystery beyond this point, and we could probably talk about this in a separate podcast, but basically the term for arcane is more accurately like a mystery and more literally a secret of God, right? So whenever Patches talk about the Godhead, or you'll see stuff like wondrous power or miracles like here, or the arcane or the eldritch truth, all that's just referring to the arcane as like this, there's these secrets of God, right? Because, that's why the star is the symbol for the arcane stuff, right? Because, the gods are the stars and da-da-da-da-da. So all of that seems to be tied into the idea that Patches is promising that he's going to show you this secret that a knowledge that only God knows, right? And you're looking down that hole, and then it's like, psych!
So now, Bergenworth, go!
Okay, so again, we go back to this reference to the spider, the ROM spider, for sure at this point. This is on the couch next to one of the choir members that's there, and she basically, it seems to be a note that was left for her from her fellows at the choir, because the English tells us, the spider hides all manner of rituals, certain to reveal nothing, for true enlightenment need not be shared. Now, the Japanese is a little bit kind of more, sort of more succinct. It almost reads like a military order, where it's like, okay, the spider hides all the ceremonies, do not reveal them, none need comprehend the enlightening truth. So it's sort of like this thing of, whatever you do, Yurie, do not disturb ROM. Do not stop this. And then the next note we get is it's slipped between the books in Willem's library. When the red moon hangs low, so again, much like in old Yarnum, the line between man and beast is blurred, and when the great ones descend, a womb will be blessed with child. Okay, this one causes lots of controversy.
Yes.
This one is probably, however, a message from Mensis when they were in Bergenworth, obviously before ROM and all that was happening, and the lecture building was still there behind Bergenworth, before the lake and all that. So there's this idea that when Mensis and people, they're getting their uniforms and stuff, they're like kind of like perusing through Willem's office and his library and things like that. And there's this note left here that sort of is kind of foreshadowing what Mensis were going to do and they end up doing, which brought the choir here in the first place in order to try to stop all this with ROM, which was when the red moon draws near, the boundary for man will blur. Obviously, we see that with the red moon, and so many people are becoming beasts and stuff, but the Mensis wants to try to become great ones as a result. And the great higher ones, or one, it's not clear on the singular or plural with Japanese here, will appear, and then they will harbor our baby. So the idea being here is that it's not like, a womb will be blessed with child when the great one appears, although that kind of does happen with us with like Ariana and stuff and Odin, but that's like a separate thing, right? It's completely unrelated to this note. The point being made here is that, okay, we have a baby, we are going to give that baby to the Great One. The Great One will take our baby, and then the Great One will give us the enlightenment stuff, right? Like, when we have like Mikolash like calling out, hey, Kosh, you're my last hope here. Grant us eyes like you did with Rom. Come on. This whole Mensis brain thing's not working out.
I just had a vision. It's Sophie and I trying to contact the moon presence, but we're like, hey, take Acer.
We have our baby. It is Acer.
He is our child.
But so that seems to be the idea. Is like, obviously, if they have Murgo, they're going to give Murgo over to the great one. They don't really care which one, as long as it's a great one who will give them what they want, right? Because they just need a great one. That's why I say, like, the singular and plural doesn't really matter with this note that much. The idea is like, okay, whether multiple great ones or one great one show up, as long as the great one takes our baby and gives us what we want, right? That seems to be the idea. It's like, okay, we're gonna make the red moon. We're gonna make the red moon appear. They probably expect it's gonna be Flora, because presumably Mensis and Choir are both familiar with this, because this is probably what happened with Lawrence when Lawrence and Gurman were making the Hunter's Dream, right? Because they're contacting Flora, same spiel, right? So probably similar things happen at that point. But the idea is like, okay, when that boundary is blurring or whatever, we're going to give the child over, and then they will allow us to ascend, so that way instead of becoming beasts, and ScHlAuChi is like, oh, our beastly idiocy and all that stuff, right? Instead, we're going to become, enlightened great ones like them, right? Like, that's sort of the idea. Because it's ultimately like a dispute with the Choir and Mensis on the order of things. Do we get the transformation right, and then we successfully contact the great ones? Or do we successfully contact the great ones, and then we'll get the transformation right? Like, it's sort of like a methodology order that they're disputing over. Like, obviously, there's the whole thing with, you kind of killed our old masters, and you're kind of being all sus about it and all that. And all, like, obviously, there's that going on. But, like, when it comes down to, like, their individual ideologies as, like, factions, that seems to be what the main dispute's over.
Excellent. Now the next note is in Yahar Ghul, the Unseen Village.
Yeah, we have quite a few small ones, but these basically all try to reaffirm the whole idea with what we talked about with the whole Murgo and the rituals and things like that. So madmen toil surreptitiously in rituals to beckon the moon, uncover their secrets. Again, so madmen in their ceremonies call the moon, and so they're being hidden. There's no choice but to break the concealment, right? So this is the idea of that, okay, they're doing all this stuff, it's being hidden. Okay, so we have no choice, but we have to break this, right? So this goes back to like what Damien's trying to do with Rom as a summon and things like that. It's like, okay, we got to try to somehow break this concealment that's causing us to be hidden, because we're doing we're all these mad people doing these rituals and things like that. So we got to get rid of that. And then the nightmarish rituals crave a newborn, find one and silence its harrowing cry. So again, the same idea. You have these nightmare ceremonies, which of course relates to obviously how the Nightmare of Mensis came about, right? Like, you're doing these ceremonies, we create the nightmare for our little faction here. They coincide with the baby, so when we get into the nightmare, we have to go find Murgo, the baby, find the baby, stop its cry, right? And that ties into like in High Insight and the Red Moon and the constant baby cries and things like that. Then, of course, there's the famous note, behold, a pale blood sky. Again, just kind of giving the idea of, oh, yeah, the Red Moon appears, it's a pale blood sky now, right? And Miyazaki actually talks a little about this in interviews about like how you can interpret that, both in terms of the moon presence, in terms of the actual appearance of the moon versus the sky and all that, because it looks like it's drained of color and stuff like that. So like, there's a few ways you can take that, but again, general idea is like, okay, Flora's coming. And then finally, the Mensis ritual must be stopped, lest we all become beasts. So stop the Mensis ceremonies, otherwise eventually all will become beasts. Again, pretty much the same thing here. Not too much to say on these notes.
Okay. And the last set of notes is found in the lecture building.
These are pretty important too, because it deals with like the end game. So the first one we find in like a corner with one of those slime monsters that the students turned into, right? So it's like, Master Willem was right. Evolution without courage will be the ruin of our race. The last line there doesn't quite capture it exactly. The idea is that, Master Willem is correct. Wretched evolution will be the fall of man. So the idea here, or wretched evolutions, you can also say. The idea, of course, being is that it's not just being like this idea of, oh, we need courage when we're evolving. No, the problem with that Willem and Bergenworth, those who follow him at Bergenworth, is that, evolution, period, is kind of a problem. That's why, like, we see, like, Willem has basically been in the seedbed state for, like, ever, right? He's refusing to have the transformation. And obviously we see what happens to the students who couldn't resist the temptation, and they decided, oh, no, we'll try, we'll get it right, we promise. And then they turn into slime monsters. And then this one guy's like, oh, wait, Master's right. this whole like forcing like this hyper evolution on ourselves is it's kind of awful. We shouldn't be doing that. It'll be the fall of man, as I put here. The depravity, corruption. It's sort of this thing that's sort of associated with like fallen angels and things of that nature. So it's sort of the point is that like nothing good will come of it, right? So it's not like some will kind of interpret it being like, okay, no, you have to do it bravely, or you have to do it with confidence or whatever. It's like no. It's like just the general concept seems to be just like completely faulty. And then like hunt the great ones, that's normal. And then of course the ever famous one, the nameless moon presence beckoned by Lawrence and his associates, Paleblood. The term here for associates sort of gives the idea there's more than one. That's not strictly true, because the term used is it's a special pluralizing suffix that called tachi, which normally it just pluralize, but when you're used it with like name people, it typically is used to assign, like, talk about a group of at least one other person. So like, let's say I'm talking about you, Sin, with Sophie, right? And I say ScHlAuChi, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm talking about that, I could be talking about the both of you, but I'm identifying ScHlAuChi because for whatever reason, I feel like she's the person I want to identify, like, primarily, I guess, in the group or whatever, right? That's the general idea, right?
Yeah.
So it's same thing could be happening here, where it's identifying Lawrence as part of a group, but that can only be one other person, i.e. Gurman, right?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily there were other people. Maybe there were, but I'm just kind of like saying that if we had to limit things to just Lawrence and Gurman, this note would still work. Right. And then there's the idea, of course, the moon presence. The Japanese is a moon fiend. Again, this is sort of the idea. The term used here is mamono, which it's a word that kind of means like a bad thing, an evil thing. So it's this word that you can translate as like demon. I choose fiend as my translation because you can also call it like a monster, like monsters in like JRPGs and things like that. It's like, oh, it's a monster, right? Like a mamono. And you'll see this in like various games. They'll play with that and this stuff of that nature. So it's like there's a little flexibility on the term. It's basically just a variation of saying, monster, demon, awful, just generic bad thing. And that seems to be the idea, is that they kind of identify flora as that, which makes sense when you consider what the red moon does and things of that nature. So, and then of course they identify here that this moon fiend is the Paleblood. So that's how we get the confirmation. Okay, this is Paleblood. This is what we've been searching for throughout the whole game. And then, of course, the last note, okay, we need to have some more chords. Well, okay, we got to create some Great One babies. And they seem to basically all try to artificially create them. As we can see, the only thing they seem to really get out of that is like, okay, we need three third chords.
When you said the 3/3 chord translates to 3/3?
Yes, I have that right here in my notes here. Yeah, because they don't say the chord part, although it is in the actual item there. So it's not like it's missing. It's just the Japanese is being, I guess, somewhat more vague or ambiguous, though not really. Because you can, like, as soon as you see like the item, you know it.
But actually, Lokey, I'm sorry, you're wrong. 3/3 refers to Mark's evil twin. Sophie, do the outro.
That was the Snack Covenant, episode 18, Notes of Bloodborne. All theories and references explained real.
And Lokey, if people want to find you on social media, where should they look for you?
You can find me on Twitter at Lokey_DS. That's Lokey_DS, Lokey. You can also find me on my website at LokeySouls.com. There's a contact page, so that way you can find me on various social media, including my Discord, my YouTube channel, things of that nature. Other than that, again, please look into buying ScHlAuChi if you're interested in more on not just talking about, say, some notes for Bloodborne, but so the entire lore of the original Dark Souls. Could be interesting. We've had great feedback from people who've already read their digital copies. We're working on getting a physical edition out to you guys as soon as possible. We'll be printing soon, so hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. We're really excited for you guys who've been loving ScHlAuChi already, and for those who are considering buying it now, hey, just check it out. You never know, either physical or digital. Either way, I'm happy to be sharing more on the how the localizations for these games have sort of helped kind of obscure some of the lore unnecessarily, and how we can kind of have a more I don't want to say complicated discussion, but sort of a more
informed?
Yeah, a more informed and consistent discussion on the lore of these games, and how Miyazaki tells these stories, and how From Software has sort of built sort of these almost like interconnecting narratives with like meta references and things between games, and so sort of they're almost always, From Software is a company that's almost always constantly in dialogue. And you can kind of see that in their works, especially if you understand the Japanese script. So again, there's tons of content that I have available for you guys to read. It's great stuff if you have the time. So again, just check me out.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Lokey.
Thank you, Lokey.
No problem. Always happy to be here with you guys.
Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Sin.
Thank you, cultists.
Microphone.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. And see y'all next time.
Bye.
Congratulations. You made it to the post-credit scene.
3/3 refers to Mark's evil twin.
Not that Mark isn't a significant person, but I think no one listening will have gotten that reference.
I certainly didn't.
Yeah. He's never even been on this.
I know, it's amazing.
This is ridiculous.
Sophie, do the outro.
Congratulations. You made it to the post-credit quiz. Would you kindly tell us which episode the following note is from by leaving a comment below?
Why, hello there. Hidetaka Miyazaki here. I was just enjoying working with Bandai Namco when Sin asked me to clarify something. While it's true that I am technically of Japanese descent, I mostly operate out of my homeland of New Jersey. Also, just to finally clarify the ongoing argument about the scripts, they are written in English first by me, and then they're rewritten to sound like some fucking theater kid. For example, Dura in Bloodborne, after he kills you, he says, next time you dream, give some thought. I don't know what that even fucking means. In Japanese, that was Deareba, soko deyoku. Kangai naosu koto dana. Both of which are mistranslations of my original line, you better stop with your shit or else I'll make your ass come out of your ears. Back to the podcast.